Great. Since we've got some introductory remarks, we'll start with those. And as more folks trickle in, again, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for tuning in. The topic for today's webinar is tracking and verification for 24/7 carbon-free energy purchases. We've got a great lineup of panelists and a very full agenda. So first, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Nate Hausman. I'm a Clean Energy Markets Manager at World Resources Institute, or WRI. If you've registered for this webinar, you're probably familiar with WRI, so I'll keep this part short. We are a global nonprofit organization. We research, design, and carry out practical solutions for people and the planet. For today's agenda, well, actually, Andrew, if you could pull up slides. Great, perfect. Yeah, there's the agenda. So first, you'll for the agenda today, you'll first hear from me. That'll be brief, and then we'll turn it over to our panelists. We've got a great lineup, and they'll share about their work and perspectives on tracking and verification and granular certificates and time-based energy attribute certificates. So first up will be Ben Gerber from M-RETS. Then we'll hear from Killian Daley from EnergyTag, and third will be John Hansen from Powerledger. I'll introduce them all in just a moment, but then we'll follow with a Q&A and a moderated discussion. And on that note, I want to encourage you to type questions for our panelists through the Q&A box on your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can, but please type them as they come up for you. You don't need to wait to the end of the webinar to type them in. We've set aside an hour for this webinar. We'll be recording it, and we'll post a recording of it on our events page. You'll be able to find the recording there soon. Next slide. Relatedly, I just want to let you know that this webinar is part of a series of webinars that WRI is doing on 24/7 CFE. You can find recordings from the first two webinars in this series, an intro webinar on 24/7 CFE and a webinar on supply products for 24/7 CFE on our events webpage, and you can navigate there using the QR code or the link on provided here. We'll announce more webinars in this series and send out invites for that soon. Finally, you can go back. Yeah, there. Finally, before we get underway, I would just want to let you know that our friends at Sustainable Energy for All and UN Energy have launched a 24/7 CFE compact. The compact is focused on decarbonizing every hour of electricity consumption on every grid where the consumption occurs. The compact has lots of signatories, energy buyers, suppliers, governments, system operators, solution providers, investors, and others. And they're all working to accelerate decarbonization and advance 24/7. So the compact is focused on a few different areas: purchasing, energy solutions, technology, policy change, and data and consumer empowerment. You can go to the URL that's at the top left hand corner of the page to learn more. So with that, let me introduce our three panelists, and we'll dive in. First up, Ben Gerber is President and Chief Executive Officer of M-RETS. Under his leadership, M-RETS developed and successfully implemented an industry-leading environmental attribute registry across all North American markets. The M-RETS platform brings unprecedented innovation to the industry, as well as access to data in pioneering ways, such as hourly production and the first ever hourly REC retirement in electricity markets and carbon pathway tracking for thermal markets. Next up will be Killian Daley, and Killian runs EnergyTag's operations, a nonprofit focused on enabling real-time electricity tracking. Alongside the world's top experts, Killian led the process of drafting the EnergyTag standard, which created the granular certificate, a robust and widely recognized instrument for hourly energy attribute tracking. The standard is supported by hundreds of organizations, including some of the world's leading sustainability players like UN Energy, Google, Microsoft, Iberdrola, AES, and Clean Energy Task Force. Killian also chairs the Lennox Foundation's carbon data specification, which aims at ensuring raw energy data is standard and available. Prior to joining EnergyTag, Killian managed global energy strategy at Air Liquide, one of the world's largest hydrogen producers. Killian holds an MBA from the Collège des Ingénieurs, maybe I mispronounced that, in Paris, and a master's degree in energy technology from the University of Cambridge. And then last up, we'll hear from John Hansen, who is a clean energy executive with 2 decades experience in international business, project and partnership development, strategy, entrepreneurship, and corporate government and multilateral engagement. He is currently leading Powerledger's expansion in North America, as well as special projects and initiatives, and has worked with organizations like Tesla, Solar City, and UNEP, as well as clean tech startups and climate-focused nonprofits. He holds an MBA, a BFA, and a certificate in climate and renewable energy finance from the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. Okay, well, with introductions out of the way, Ben, I'm going to turn the platform over to you. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nate, and thank you to WRI for hosting this. So I am going to jump into. Are you able to see the right screen there, Nate?
Yeah, we sure are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, well, welcome everybody. It's great to see so many people. 150 plus participants on is amazing for early in the morning. If you're on the central or western time zone of the US, and for the rest of the world, ending your day. So a little bit about M-RETS, and you got a pretty comprehensive introduction to begin with, but we're a little bit unique. We are a nonprofit tracking system that owns our own technology. We've grown considerably. I used the start of COVID, March 2020 as an example of our growth. We had 5 employees. We now have 15 employees. And then in March 2020, we had 3 full-time contract developers. I think we're up to 10 now. So all of the revenue that's collected through our system is invested back into the system, which makes us unique. And we believe very much in that these markets need to, environmental attribute markets need to continue to evolve. While they were really innovative when they were launched 10, 15 years ago, there has been what we believe a lack of the necessary investment in infrastructure upgrades. So it's exciting to see a lot of attention paid to this now. We are US based. Our roots are in the Midwest of the United States. However, we do track in all 50 states and Canadian provinces. So truly a North American platform. So I think it's important this is a question that we get a lot, and actually is something less so now, I think, based on the fact that there's both so many people on this call, but so much attention paid to this in the energy media and discussions. But is 24/7 CFE just another fad? And I don't think so. Obviously, we've, as an organization, have invested a lot of time and interest in this, but I think there are a lot of really important pieces to this that make it different from some of the other fads that we've seen. And I think to really drill down in this, there is a growing demand. Google was one of the pioneers in this with some of the other technology companies, Microsoft as well. However, we're starting to see that interest grow, and we have cities and countries around the world through the 24/7 CFE initiative that's launched by the UN that was mentioned earlier, has really driven increased recognition and demand around the world. And there is we believe that the important part of this is this evolving goal that places the highest quality and quantifying the benefits of the decisions that are made in building and operating clean energy infrastructure, with the goal of decarbonizing the environmental footprint of cities, corporations, individuals. And that's what really brings this idea of 24/7 CFE to this really powerful position. It's also important to recognize that, and we listened early on, that there was a demand for better solutions, and whether that is increased API connectivity, I won't get too technically wonky here, I promise, but application programming interfaces. So that's how computer systems talk to each other. So to automate a lot of the infrastructure around this. And there's a part of that, that demand for better solutions was an interest in transforming the energy grid to reach a carbon-free electricity penetration that would allow us to reach our goals. And it was really important as an organization to encourage energy markets to incentivize these decisions that have the greatest impact on reducing our reliance on carbon emitting resources. And based on the current infrastructure, which we are supportive of, and we are balancing this act of managing compliance markets for certain states in the certain states, but also these innovative voluntary markets. And there needed to be tools to measure and evaluate the impacts that decisions by these various entities that I mentioned, so that they can ensure they're maximizing the environmental benefits of their investments and decisions. And we do believe that REC systems are an important piece of that. I know there's a current debate that's going on about scope 2 emissions, but RECs are a really critical piece, and environmental attributes more generally in being able to support and measure the decarbonization of our economy at a global level. And there's not only just billions of US dollars invested in this, but a lot of time and effort, and major decisions have been made on the recognition of the scope 2 value. And we believe that to continue to sustain that, there is a need for greater investment on the systems level, but also recognition of the data importance. And then, one big piece that is a problem is the data access and standards. This only works, and Killian is going to also talk about this, but we view this as there are different ways to look at the data, but there needs to be at the very least harmonization of data, but more importantly, data standards as these types of systems will need to work across international boundaries and corporations and individuals that transcend national borders. And so having a standard way to measure all this is really critical. So this breaks my rule on slides having too much information. But the reason I did that, and I'm willing to do it, is I think this is an important leave behind. And I know we will distribute these slides later. But where we are and where we're going is something that I really wanted to talk about. M-RETS has supported the first ever hourly transaction and retirement with Google, and that was in March 2021. But it was basic, and I think it's important to recognize that there is a lot that needs to be done, including the fractionalization with RECs and things like that need to happen before we can have a more nuanced understanding and market to evolve. But we allowed for a issuance that wasn't broken up into individual RECs to be integrated with the hourly data. Right now, we are working on, and hopefully we'll implement soon, the ability to fractionalize RECs. A lot of the infrastructure work has actually already been done by our team to fractionalize RECs down to the watt level by hour. So being able to pull out individual watt level increments from a greater batch, transact, so send those RECs, and then retire them. And so that is where we hope to go, in line with the standard that Killian will talk about in a minute. And one thing that I want to point out is the second bullet is that this is really what I call a true market-based approach. And it requires more than just large buyers and sellers, which tended to drive, at least in North American markets, this will require the ability to transact between distributed energy resources and potentially small homeowners and large corporate entities to ensure that they're able to meet their demand with a variety of resources that are carbon free. And because we are moving away from just annualized matching, which is not bad, I want to be very clear. It's not a bad thing. It's just different. And the ability to then transact on all this is, requires a bigger market to evolve. And we believe the registry will form the basis or the source of truth from which the market can build and scale to provide more advanced features. So working with third-party companies, it was recently announced Singularity Energy just launched a initiative to provide data on various US-based ISOs FlexiDAO is working in Europe for this. So we believe registries will build the basis, and that third parties via API connectivity will build enhanced features to allow all sorts of customers to evolve and support this market. So one of the things to emphasize, and we hear this a lot, is this tension between 24/7 CFE and emissionality. And we believe that it's very important to see that hourly data is an important first step in integrating energy market data. And there will be companies that want to focus on just 24/7 CFE. Some will want to focus on emissionality and some with both. But regardless of what your end goal is here, you need that hourly data. And that's what's really critical about increasing the awareness and the opportunities for registries and data providers around the world to offer this information. And then upon that, you can start building on things like estimated avoided emissions, which is focused on emissionality, and that brings up a whole host of other issues or discussions. But one thing that is really hard, and one thing we're working through, is data validation. And we really think, so it's one thing, I don't want to minimize the complexity of building a system where you have both, monthly recs and hourly recs. However, the biggest thing we're looking at is, how do you start validating hourly data as a registry provider? It's a lot easier when you have a feasibility analysis that just requires a certain variance factor between a monthly expected generation and what was submitted. However, it's a lot different when it becomes hourly. So whether that requires machine learning or trendy terms like that, or it's just better modeling and a better understanding of that modeling, is one thing that as a registry we're seeing is probably the hardest part of this, is how do we validate this data? And then we also believe that getting agreement on API standards to streamline and digitize this management is going to be really critical. It's one thing to deal with 12 issuances a year as a generator and to annually match certificates as a obligated party. It's a lot different when you move to 8760. And so automation is going to be really important. And we believe that it will be a lot of third parties that via API will interact with the registry and be able to automate a lot of this functionality. And then, last but not least is we believe it's really critical to implement standards, as I mentioned before, or at least data harmonization. And we're dealing with complex data streams that are going to move across multiple systems globally, and any barriers or that are built both artificially or because systems don't want to cooperate or whatever will really slow down the adoption and add a lot of cost to users. So we see this importance being broken up into two types of standards. There's data standards, so protocols that dictate the flow of data across systems. So for example, API standards, and then process standards. That's protocols that govern the use of data that provide a comparable look across systems. So for example, emissionality comparisons across different jurisdictions where for some reason, one country might allow a data point to be used. And so being clear and transparent about that is really critical. To provide you with some examples or resources, I thought it was important to give this leave behind. You will get this for those of you that registered. But just as a understanding, and I apologize that I did not include Killian's great GC standards, but I'll let him talk about that. And with that, I'll hand it over to Killian.
Thank you very much, Ben, for the great presentation. Let's continue. Okay, I'll just share my slides. So can everyone see?
Yeah, looks good. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Yeah, so I'm Killian Daley. I'm General Manager at EnergyTag. And today I'm just going to talk to you basically about our journey towards granular certification standardization and 24/7 tracking. But I think it's important to first of all take a step back and just remind ourselves why we're doing this. So today we have energy attribute certificates, which give monthly or annual transparency. They don't give us the full picture. They've been extremely useful in incentivizing renewable capacity. But we believe we need to move towards a more 24/7 or hourly tracking to get that full picture, that high granularity hourly picture every month of what a consumer needs to do to decarbonize their electricity on an hourly basis, rather than thinking of that at a monthly basis. So basically, EnergyTag brings together 500 organizations around the world to define and promote granular certificates, enabling next-gen clean energy markets. So granular certificates bring hourly clean electricity pricing They also bring more granular hourly consumer transparency compared to today's systems. And they provide a more clear incentive for storage in particular, which is not quite incentivized with today's current systems because of the lack of a timestamp or the lack of an hourly clean energy value so crucial to storage. And fundamentally, as we now move towards the question of how do we totally decarbonize grids on a 24/7 basis, then we need to move towards granular certificates to incentivize clean energy markets because they can deliver 24/7 CFE. Annual or monthly certificates can't get us the whole way. And that, this transformation unlocks a number of elements of system change. So as I've mentioned, there's clean energy value. So, hourly clean energy pricing should divert, the billions that is already spent and is important on renewable capacities in solar and wind, divert them also into storage and flexibility, and addressing millions of tons of extra emissions around the world that are not addressed today, and often addressing natural gas demand as well, which is often used for balancing. It's more transparency for consumers. Again, it could lead to more advanced clean energy standards, the next generation of clean energy green tariffs, for example, potentially 24/7 RPSs in the US at a state or a federal level. Really, really importantly, 24/7 clean products. So like a more robust next generation definition of what it means to be green, what it means to be clean. For example, green hydrogen. And we've seen this already come into force largely. The European Union, for example, is basically proposing a set of laws that make it mandatory to do 24/7 CFE if you're going to produce green hydrogen in Europe. And that's over 10 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030, 500 terawatt hours of electricity demand. So that it's already starting to be embedded, this requirement. And then finally, of course, granular certificates are the instrument we need to unlock the next generation of carbon accounting, more granular hourly carbon accounting, which could change how companies set and meet their emissions targets. And I think the movement is growing in support. So we've obviously been really, really happy and thankful for the support of the UN compact on 24/7. They've been very supportive of EnergyTag and granular certification in enabling markets that deliver carbon-free energy every hour, every day. Obviously, President Biden's executive order a while back stating that the US federal government, so the largest electricity purchaser in the US, will basically commit to buying half its electricity on an hourly basis. Europe system operators, so this is one of the world's largest clean energy markets with some of the highest renewable penetrations, they came out with a paper recently saying we need to move to more granular certification, to granular guarantees of origin. It's a huge message also. And similarly, from reputable institutions like Stanford and Princeton, they're saying we need to move to hourly accounting, and the next frontier is 24/7. So there is a movement growing also amongst governments, system operators, and academics that encouraging this change. So at EnergyTag, we're bringing together basically a global movement of consumers. So of course, some of the world's leading sustainability leaders, as you can see there, suppliers like AES, NG, Vattenfall, who are actively working on building out 24/7 products and signing deals already. Of course, crucially, the traceability experts. So Ben and M-RETS have been a massive part of EnergyTag from the beginning. Powerledger also, of course, with John and his team, and many others, updating their systems, enabling hourly tracking. And then we interact, of course, and coordinate and share these messages with key governments and standards bodies, like the European Commission and the EPA, or the United Nations, to just let them know what we're doing and the importance of this movement. So that's basically what EnergyTag is. It's a non-profit movement that wants to define and build a market for granular energy certificates around the world. And we fundamentally believe, that 24/7 tracking, it's really an ecosystem thing. It needs a system change. So we work across 3 pillars. First of all, it's standards and guidelines. So as Ben mentioned already, in March this year, we published the world's first granular certificate or 24/7 tracking standard, supported by over 100 organizations. You can find that on our website, and I'll give the link after also. And we're going to start auditing against that standard from Q4 this year. So we have 10 organizations already interested in being audited around the world. And that will really help us to build this robust and trusted instrument through open and transparent audits. Then, of course, there's market development. So we have 12 pilots, talking more about them later. We do market matching as well, helping buyers and sellers get in contact with each other to get deals going. And GC API, not APC, API standards as well, to make sure that the technologies talk together properly. And finally, and very importantly, we advocate and develop policy positions for granular certificates. So now, GCs are firmly on the policy agenda in the European Union, in the UK. And also, of course, we're going to be promoting as the WRI starts to look at opening up the Greenhouse Gas Protocol for the inclusion of granular certificates within that protocol for a more precise hourly carbon accounting. Just a word on the technology itself and where we're at today. So within EnergyTag, we have registries with over 1,000 terawatt hours of tracking. This is obviously huge amounts of electricity. Europe's electricity consumption is 3,000, for example. So large registries around the world have already piloted this, and they're scaling up. Of course, the likes of M-RETS, registry operators like Unicorn and Grexel and IREC, they're all working actively on this topic. On various use cases also, from green hydrogen to EV fleets. Of course, the data center industry is moving quickly here as well. So, we have a very solid foundation and a very good start, but we have a lot more to do. We need to audit these schemes, of course, first of all, to build a robust instrument. We need data standards. So we're working closely, and I'm chairing the carbon data specification of the Linux Foundation to make sure raw data is available. We need GC marketplaces. We need more GC products. We also need regulatory change to remove roadblocks to hourly tracking, specifically in the European Union, where the tracking system there is actually regulated at a federal level. We need roadblocks to be removed in order to enable this movement to move forward at the pace it needs to move forward. And then finally, of course, we need better recognition of 24/7 CFE and better and more granular carbon accounting standards that recognize those buyers who want to go that next step. Demand is already being committed. So as I mentioned, the 24/7 compact brings together 70 signatories, some of the world's largest organizations committing to working towards 24/7 CFE. Google and Microsoft have set specific goals for 24/7 goals for 2030. So that's, there are dozens of terawatt hours of consumption already. In the European Union, we've seen a lot of movement on renewable hydrogen. So 10 million tons within the union and 10 outside the union. So that will really drive a lot of demand, potentially over 500 terawatt hours of demand for hourly tracking to meet the targets by 2030. And also the European Parliament is proposing a move now of Europe's tracking systems from annual to hourly and 24/7. So again, we've done some estimates here about, it could be 400 terawatt hours plus of demand for granular guarantees of origin in Europe by 2030, given already today's annual tracking is 800. So, there's a lot happening already. A lot more needs to be done in the short term. More deals need to be signed, but, it's a great start. And again, also the US federal government has committed volumes here. So massive organizations are committing volumes already, sending a clear signal that, we need to now update our tracking systems so all of this can be tracked and verified. I mentioned a little bit, and I touched on these already. I won't spend too long on the slide, but I think it's just good to give a flavor to people of what's coming, right? Google and Microsoft have set these targets and they're already signing deals. So the next generation of clean energy deals has already started to be signed. They've signed over a gigawatt between them with the likes of NG and AES. And then, these deals have specific percentage hourly delivery of clean electricity embedded in the contracts. So this is really a move from annual to hourly that's already started. And, of course, we only think this is the only very, very beginning of this. And we expect many more companies to come on board and to sign similar deals in the coming years. How it works, this is one of the questions I know that was in the agenda. Basically, hourly tracking works very, very much like today's annual tracking. You have production device meters that are checked and measured, and then they basically that goes to the issuance of granular certificates, which can be traded and transferred and ultimately retired in the name of the consumer who wants to make that claim, so the final beneficiary. basically we're building on a lot of the really, really good strengths of today's systems, but promoting two major changes. That's time stamping those certificates, so we know the exact time of production or release from storage, and also having our certificates of a different size. So a megawatt hour is too large a unit to do the kind of 24/7 matching that we would need or tracking that we would need. So they'll have to go to a lower granularity, potentially watt hour granularity. Again, in the EnergyTag GC scheme standard, there's lots and lots and lots of information on all of this. So I encourage you to go read that if you want to dig in more to the nuts and bolts, shall we say, of how this works. But that's kind of a basic overview of how these systems work. So that's it for me. Obviously, please do reach out to us if you are not already on our mailing list. All the details are here. Sign up to the mailing list via our website. Contact me directly if you want. And there's many things you could do. You could help us advocate. You could start buying and selling. You could just read our standard. All the links are there of how to get involved. So I hope it's been interesting for you all, and happy to connect, of course, after the call if you have any follow-up questions. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll pass over to John from Powerledger, who will give some excellent insight to how this is done on the code face. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Killian. And just as I'm bringing up my slide deck here, I want to just really say thank you to WRI. I've always been inspired, and the work that you guys have done has always been really important to the work that I do across that I and all of us have done across a lot of different functions. And also just really thank you to both Ben and Killian. You guys are both real true leaders as well, and so it's an honor to be on here with you and working with you guys. And can we see the title slide? Is that up there? Can I get a thumbs up from someone?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. Excellent. So I'll dive right in. I'm going to skip through a lot of slides. And I do want to say that, Ben and Killian have covered a lot of really great stuff. So I'm going to try and build on that. So I will skip over some of the stuff that I have just for time and to not be redundant as well. So my name is John Hansen. I'm Business Development Executive, helping to expand and scale Powerledger in North America. Make sure we can advance these slides. Here we go. And just really briefly, Powerledger started in 2016, bringing together blockchain and fintech with energy markets and for peer-to-peer energy trading and things of that nature. And we realized that we could leverage these tools to provide an extensive amount of solutions for the energy market and to really help us with our mission, which is to decarbonize the global grid and democratize energy. And so that's kind of where the origin came from, is in peer-to-peer energy trading. But then we have expanded out into supporting 24/7 carbon-free energy and grid resiliency. I'll get into actually some of that in just a second. I'll wait for that slide. So we are a global company headquartered in Australia, but we have many countries that are using the technology now, where we have deployed, and also have a lot of publicly disclosed and a lot more non-disclosed projects that are in development as well. And we're considered one of the leaders in clean energy blockchain. And just to reiterate, we are a blockchain-enabled clean energy software developer. We have a lot of global partnerships. You'll see our wonderful partner M-RETS here, which we'll talk about what we're doing with M-RETS in a second, but we have partnerships across all sectors: public, private, nonprofit, government, et cetera, and we are deeply involved in the industry as well. We are a member of EnergyTag, and thank you to Killian for all his amazing work and all the team's amazing work at EnergyTag, as well as a number of different relevant, sector relevant and application relevant organizations as well. We are also a UN Energy Compact submitter and also a founding signatory to the 24/7 Carbon-Free Energy Compact as well. To give you a brief overview, our platform, we are a blockchain-enabled clean energy software platform, and we are migrating over onto Solana. I'm happy to have conversations about blockchain at a deeper level. If somebody's interested, they can reach out to us. The way we leverage the blockchain for all its benefits, which I will get to again, is in both data aggregation and the use of that data to the application of that data for energy and emissions tracking, visibility, energy attribute tracking, etc. And then also for the creation of markets. And that's really critical to understand. We're creating markets around transactive energy, that is peer-to-peer energy trading amongst different actors in various configurations of networks, and then also for vehicle to X and other types of applications. That's both behind the meter and across. We also do grid flexibility, so that's bringing in forward markets, and we're working both on the distribution system and also moving into the transmission system, and also the creation of local energy markets. All of this is relevant in tracking and verification because we have the ability to track down to the watt level, as Killian was talking about, as well as Ben was also talking about that. And we will leverage that in different ways. What we're going to focus on today is the 24/7 component of that. We have two primary features that we apply. One is vision, and that is for the aggregation of energy and emissions data for an organization, whatever type of organization that is. We're going to show you a little bit about vision in a second. And it's for managing, procurement, decision-making. Decarbonization is the core of it all. And then also streamlining reporting and other things like that. And then also TraceX, which is the project that we're working on with, or that we have launched the first market with Ben at M-RETS, and that is an environmental commodities marketplace that is commodity agnostic, but we are launching it right now for renewable energy certificates and are enabling tools for TEECs, the time-based energy attribute certificates, and GCs, et cetera, GOs, and all that kind of stuff. We've already talked about 24/7 carbon free, so I'm going to skip my comments on that and just really say that this is the future, as Ben was talking about. This is where things are moving, and I'm going to go straight into how we track and trace and verify and enable a lot of these solutions to be deployed. As I mentioned, we're focusing on Vision and TraceX. Vision is a smart data visualization layer, and what we do is we integrate. We integrate with different hardware and also software to aggregate data about an organization's energy and emissions. It primarily starts with energy, and then we apply the emissions. Again, we can talk about that if you wanted to reach out to me later about how we do that. But we aggregate all that information and then process that and provide tools for organizations to use. This is an example. We do a lot of white labeling because we worked with a lot of different organizations that want to actually leverage this in different ways. So we provide a white labeled dashboard that offers some customization as well. We are providing information, we're aggregating and providing information about consumption, emissions, the locations, time, obviously, and also reporting. As you can see here, what we're looking at in this particular view, because you do have other time increments that you can choose, but this is a 24/7 because this is, or excuse me, a 24-hour load profile. For an organization, consumption profile, I should say. And what we're looking at here are the energy types, meaning where is it, what type of energy contracting is what I like to say. Is it coming from a power purchase agreement? Is it coming from are we tracking the data from the grid? Is it green retail? Or is it some other form of energy? But typically are those source of or the contracting type, I guess. And then also the energy sources. Is it hydro? Is it solar? Is it wind? Is it non-renewable? So what we're doing is we're creating that dashboard that provides you with that granular information about where your energy is, what type of energy you are consuming in time increments, and also location. And then there are different ways to configure this information, providing a score of carbon-free energy, and then also being able to look at your operational emissions. One of the great things about this platform is that it then, in addition to what you can do is you can isolate your non-renewables and as an organization, and then say, we're going to offset this. And you have a number of different ways to choose to offset that. or go through procurement. And one of those is to link up to the TraceX platform and be able to grab that specific profile. Grab that specific profile, have that go over to the market, a spot market for renewable energy certificates, eventually granular hourly renewable energy certificates, and be able to match that profile and offset that on a spot market. This also provides the ability for an organization that is a global, multinational, or intergovernmental organization to be able to look at its entire global portfolio at various degrees of aggregation, and then also drill down into literally the meter level data as well. Then one example of that, we have a partnership with Equator, which is a retailer in France, where we are working with them, and they are providing some of this visibility there to their customers, both residential and commercial, where they can choose their own energy mix. So literally they can look at a map of projects and say, I want my energy to come from this wind project, this hydro project, whatever the case may be, or this hydrogen project, because that has been brought up, and I want to make sure that we highlight that because it is emerging very, very quickly, and to be able to do that. Then moving on to how we are applying tracking and verification and things like that in the environmental attribute certificate market. Again, we have developed TraceX. It is a fully digital automated marketplace. It is a spot market, digital spot market for energy certificates. Well, again, as I mentioned, it's any environmental commodity, but right now it's being launched for energy attributes certificates, renewable energy certificates. All actors are welcome: buyers, sellers, brokers, intermediaries. We're dealing with all types, compliance and voluntary, buy, sell. You can buy, sell, and retire and settle all on the single platform. Because we are blockchain enabled, it allows us to do a lot of things in a far more efficient way at a greater scale with greater volume than we would be able to if we were not. And also by developing and that results in things like these seamless trades, faster, more cost-efficient processes. Real-time price discovery, these are really important things for the market, for a healthy market, but also mitigating credit and settlement risks. And I think in terms of tracking and verification, which I'll provide a little bit more detail on how that is done, but the ability to transfer and have different registries updated instantly, creating that immutable audit trail for that verification as well. We are launching this essentially. We've got our North American marketplace that has been launched in partnership with M-RETS. We are live. And then we also have one that we're developing in ASEAN, and we are integrating with IREC as well. This is, I think, where we get into some of the tracking and verification, how the process works on TraceX in a REC or renewable energy certificate process. The energy is generated, the attributes are stamped, as Killian was talking about. Time, we do time, location, it's all time, location, and source, and other attributes as well. It is goes to the registry. In terms of how it gets onto the spot market, what we do is those who are participating on that registry can import their RECs. And again, all of this is tracked on the blockchain. They import their RECs onto the TraceX platform. Those RECs are essentially tokenized, and then they're imported. And then the entity can put those up for sale, and then it goes out into the marketplace. Buyer identifies them, and an order is matched, and it automatically generates the transaction. And that is all again recorded on the blockchain, and then it is the ownership and transfer is then logged on the registry, and everything again is on the blockchain, and it's verifiable, auditable, all that kind of stuff. These are some of the dashboards we're launching with sort of dashboards that provide the spot market for the way RECs are currently done. And I'm going to kind of skip over this because it is not as relevant to the tracking and verification. But it does, we are giving the granular, the ability to look at RECs at a granular level. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Through different filters for different types of RECs as well. We will be moving over to the granular hourly RECs. I'll tell you about that in a second. But we will also be enabling more and more functions and features to improve the markets as well. And this is what I wanted to get to, is our 24-hour TEAC marketplace, essentially. What we're doing is capturing functionality from Vision, where an entity can put in a load profile and identify what they want to offset and be able to essentially put that out onto a market as a profile to match. And then this is, again, I think one of the things we'll be talking about a little bit later is how do we develop markets as well. So we are providing the tools for this. These will be rolling out over time. And then there will also be market development that has to occur. And I think that's a really important conversation. Hopefully we'll have time to get to that. And so some of the other things that can be done with these tools is to be able to isolate where an entity might have actually excess clean energy generation on an hourly level that is in excess of its hourly load profile, to be able to isolate that and then put that out on the market for another entity to be able to pick up those hourly RECs and the time and the location as well. And then finally, what I wanted to kind of just touch base on is the blockchain component of it, where every transaction is tokenized, it's coded on our Powerledger energy blockchain, and it enables all those instantaneous reconciliation, et cetera. And this is applicable right here. What we're showing is an example of how that's used in the environmental attribute certificate markets, but this is also applicable in our transactive energy markets, our flexibility, and other applications that we have. And I think, I can't remember if it was Ben or Killian had spoken about the enablement of watt level marketplaces, tracking and verification of those clean energy marketplaces at the watt level across all markets, not just renewable energy certificates. I think it was Killian actually that was saying that we have to keep going further than that. That's just part of the solution. We have to keep going to, in our opinion, the grid as well. And then the benefits of leveraging blockchain for this are traceability, certainty, the encrypted records. You've got that single source of truth, rapid and secure issuance, and then reporting and auditing. So you can always make sure that what has been transacted is what has been transacted. And I believe that is it. Yes, that is it. I hope I came in pretty close to time. And if you have any questions, here's my contact information as well. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much. Appreciate it, both Ben, Killian, John. Lots to digest there, lots of good information, and proof of point, we have a ton of questions that have come in. And I was going to I had some questions teed up, but I think we'll just transition to audience questions since there's such good ones, and you already answered a lot of my questions anyway. I'm going to start with this question, and I'll let Ben take the first crack at it, but certainly let the other panelists as well. The question is, what does the future hold for unbundled granular certificates? Is there a role for them to fill hours in a buyer's consumption profile, or should we only be recognizing certificates that are bundled with power and result in new projects? Are granular certificates as a standalone instrument credible as a tool for reducing one's carbon footprint, or more broadly grid system emissions?
Yeah, so thank you, and I could write a book on this, but I wouldn't because no one would read it. But a few things. I think first of all, I think there is a misplaced obsession, for lack of a better term, on additionality, and I think it's a extremely flawed idea that, especially the way it's done now. So for instance, if you build a new renewable facility that displaces an existing non-carbon emitting facility under current acceptance criteria, that's additional, but it provides potentially zero carbon value to the grid. So that's where this idea of emissionality comes in, and looking at the actual contributions to carbon reductions. And the reason I address that first is I think there's a similarly misplaced obsession to deride the value of unbundled RECs versus bundled RECs. And the reason I bring this up is it's the same problem that we see with people that say, well, we will only move to granular RECs, and monthly RECs are bad. And we look at it as I didn't include this slide that I often do, but some of you who probably seen me present, and I feel bad for you to see me again, is this picture of a tiger, and we use the difference between an HD TV and a standard definition TV. And this actually comes from Greg Miller, who is a researcher at UC Davis, and now it's Singularity Energy, which is that one isn't better than the other. One just has more definition and clarity. And I would say the same thing with bundled versus unbundled RECs. It's different. One isn't better than the other. And I would say that unbundled RECs are going to become increasingly important in a 24/7 or emissionality world, where the ability to transact so that you can meet a stated goal, whether that's 24/7 or a 24/7 CFE or an emissions-based goal, the need to be able to transact certificates that maybe you didn't actually own that facility and build it yourself will become a critical piece to meeting these goals. So I'd actually say we'll probably see, hopefully, the tide turn on those things. And sorry for my forceful comments, but I think it's really important. Just like when we see bashing between, well, we're emissionality focused and you're 24/7 CFE, which is bad. The goal is to reduce carbon on the grid. That should be our goal. Stop fighting with each other.
Great. Anybody else want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, maybe I could hop in on that. So
Please.
I think, it's obviously a question asked by a lot of people. Ultimately, there's place for both. And, it depends, you cannot get to 100% based on predicting and signing long-term contracts and then realizing the day before that you haven't really predicted 15 years before you signed the contract that you were going to consume that much that day. So we need the flexibility given, as in power markets. We're not going to get rid of power markets and just have long-term contracts. We need the flexibility of unbundled certificates to fill in those gaps and make sure folks can get to 100%. So I think it's something that, of course, as well, we need to call on perhaps research from academia into, and I know that's actually underway at the moment, and I'm sure in the coming weeks folks will be hearing more about that to look into this question. But absolutely, there's a role for unbundled granular certificates along with bundled certificates, and that's up to the consumers how they want to construct their portfolios and how they want to balance their risk.
And I just want to add that filling in the gaps around those around the certificates are the creation of local energy markets for clean energy, where you can buy and you can trade energy amongst prosumers and consumers to both balance the grid, increase the resiliency, reduce congestion, and even lower costs as well. And you're maximizing you're optimizing the local grids with clean energy and incentivizing more clean energy generation, i.e. decarbonization.
Great, thanks. There was a question that came in about crediting storage resources and green hydrogen. I know some of those questions got answered in type format, but I thought there were enough of them that it might be good to have a verbal answer as well. Killian, would you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. On green hydrogen, maybe first of all, I think it's something that certainly in the European Union, it's been anyone familiar with the policy discussions there, it's been a really, really hot topic over the last couple of years. And ultimately, the European Commission, so the federal regulator, has decided 24/7 CFE for green hydrogen because it's going to add, hundreds and hundreds of terawatt hours of load. It's large electrical consumption, and they just want to make sure it's meeting the very highest possible sourcing standard. And they've deemed that to be, hourly matching with 24/7 CFE, because there was, I think that comes from perhaps a fear of electrolyzers being built, forgetting where the electricity is coming from, and maybe building gas turbines to produce hydrogen. And just as a side note, if you use natural gas to produce electricity, to produce hydrogen, it's twice as bad as doing nothing. It's twice as bad as grey hydrogen in terms of emissions. So it's something we absolutely have to avoid, and that's where 24/7 CFP can be powerful. The other question around storage, obviously, it's one of the critical reasons in our view why we need to move towards hourly tracking, because then you can start to value storage. You can start to store energy at times of low clean energy prices and move it to those times of day, California nighttime, Spanish night times when there's no sun, and you basically have that price premium that can push projects over the line from being approved or not. And that's really what a granular certificate is at the most fundamental level. It's a pure price premium for the clean developers versus the fossil developers.
Great. Anybody else want to say anything related to storage or green hydrogen?
No, I would only say that this is a great area that EnergyTag has been doing a lot of work on. It's probably along with data validation, which I know there's a question. If we don't get to it, I will hopefully respond to it in writing because it's rather wonky. It's probably the most difficult area, even though it sounds simple as how you deal with losses and everything else like that. So it's going to be very policy heavy. And I think this is an important place to, most of the problems in providing this level of data are all human created market issues and not necessarily technology problems. The technology solutions, whether it's blockchain, traditional databases, aren't going to change the problem that we have to get together and agree on solutions, either regionally, globally, or nationally.
Great, thanks. We do have a lot of questions, so it'll be hard to get to them all. But there was a question about markets in developing countries and demand for tracking and verification systems. And Killian, I wondered if you wanted to speak to that and if there are particular challenges in developing countries related to this.
Sure. Yeah. So number one, I think the question was, is there members of EnergyTag or participants from developing countries? Absolutely. We have a membership from across also Africa, Asia, South America. And we think it's obviously crucial and very much in line with Sustainable Energy for All's mission that 24/7 clean energy, it happens everywhere, and it's not just in certain parts of North America or Europe where it happens, but also everywhere, because the benefits in terms of climate, in terms of air pollution, everyone should have those benefits. So it's absolutely critical that we are inclusive here, and we're looking forward indeed to going to Bangkok, to the IREC International Conference, to talk about granular certificates in EnergyTag in some of those more developing markets in November. Absolutely key. And if there are folks who want to reach out, please do reach out directly to me if you have projects going on in those developing countries and markets.
Great. Well, we're coming close to time, but I want to pitch a question to John, and I want to also allow you a chance to speak to sort of the larger market challenges and market building questions that that you raised. But before doing that, I also want to ask a specific question that had to do with the carbon footprint of blockchain itself. And the question is there energy consumption for tracking and tracing taking into account when the environmental attributes are stamped?
So yes, that's a very good question. I don't have all the technical details, and I don't have my my cheat sheet with me about the energy consumption. But one of the reasons that we have moved from Ethereum to Solana is because of the efficiencies that are associated with Solana. And I don't have the data for you. I apologize, but people can follow up with me as well if they would like, and I can share more information. But I think it's down to the 0.000027 of a kilowatt hour or kilowatt hour, I think, per transaction, and Solana can get up to 50,000 transactions per second. It is the most efficient, according to our research, the most efficient of the blockchains that are out there. And so, yes, there is always going to be some energy consumption and data. And so we also do offset, as well as we have our own generation as well. So, we are working toward, I think we might be near or already exceeded 100%. But yes, that is an issue. And we do have that data. If you want to follow up with me, I'm happy to answer offline.
And John, well, maybe I'll let each panelist, before we wrap, just say a final few words. I know, Ben, you wanted to sort of talk about data validation, among other things. I think, John, you wanted to speak to sort of larger market building and challenges. And Killian, maybe I'll give you a chance to speak to any other questions or answers you'd like. But just a couple parting shots from each of our panelists, and we'll do it in the order they spoke. So we'll start with you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the biggest issues that we see just overall in the energy environment, and this transcends, RECs and others, is there's a lack of transparent data. There is a lack of good data. And if you don't believe it, I would suggest to look more into it, because the data we have is probably, I would say, abysmal. And I don't think I'm being obnoxious by saying that. And I think it's important that we recognize it, because if we continue to operate under the assumption that we have great data, then we're really kidding ourselves. So as part of this process, that's where data standards, both process standards, especially, will really help us, because if we have multiple different countries trying to claim emissions, avoided emissions or actual emissions using different processes and different levels of valid data, we're not actually making progress. And so one of the questions that came up is, how do you validate this data? And honestly, it's really hard. I just pulled my home solar, I'll use this example, my home solar meter data, and compared it to what the PV watt systems and the SAM system, which are both provided by the US government, would said by hour what they'd produce. And for solar, only about 52% of the hours were what the models expected them to produce. One uses weather data and one doesn't. And so how do we validate generation information that comes through an RTO? By the way, RTO data isn't great either. It's the best that we have, but I would be doing a disservice to this industry by saying it's great. It's not, and we need to do better. And that's incumbent on the RTOs. But then, as those that rely on that data, we need to continue to push them and openly criticize it when it needs to be. And there is a lot of examples that I could cite where we were told by providers that the data that we were showing in our system and got directly from the RTO does not match theirs. And then it becomes, how do you reconcile it? And why is this important? It's one thing if you're off by a few percentage points on a monthly, on a monthly scale, but when you're getting down to the hour, and a different hour could be vastly different in value, this data has to be good. And we have to figure out a way to flag it. And there's no way, just like it's going to be impossible without automation to manage 8760 in a manual manner, validating this data in a manual process. So one of the things we're looking at is, how could we fund this work? We don't usually look for funding. However, it's the first time we've looked at, it's probably going to be millions of dollars to build an open source model. And that's one thing that we're looking at. Actually, I need to talk to Killian about this, but how could we fund an open source model that globally could be used to validate the data so that all the systems are using a similar process? So we also know that if Thailand is using this data and the US is, that there is at least a link between the quality of the data. And that's where EnergyTag is providing really, really important values, because Powerledger and M-RETS can't operate if we don't have trust in the data.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I know we're over time, but I just want to, in terms of the market building, this is the core of it right here, is that we, all the different actors working together to, A, set the standards at the most granular level, and then B, start to build the tools around it in a collaborative way across all sectors and all actors, to be able to test and implement and refine and build the markets, provide the tools, and let the markets show up as well.
Great, thanks so much. Killian, did you have any parting shots?
Yeah, just join us. I think sign up to EnergyTag, get in touch with John and Ben, and just join the movement. Start to help out with these issues around data standardization, regulatory change, market building, yeah, now is the time for action. So that's it.
Great. Well, we've managed to fill that hour very, very quickly and then some. I want to thank all our panelists, Ben, Killian, John. Great presentations, great answers. And I also want to thank all our attendees. There's a lot of great questions here. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but really appreciate your attention and for tuning in. We'll have future webinars in this series, and we'll be sure to send out invitations to those. And as we said before, we'll post a recording of this webinar along with slides to our events page. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you all.